Welcome back. You're still tuned in to the Power Station Energy 100. This is Econo Chat. Let's talk business with Mr. Daniel Steinman and myself, Elsie Binyani, as your hostess. Mr. Daniel Steinman, I think the listeners are ready to hear what you have to say about what went wrong, or, you know, as the regulatory body that which you mentioned before we went on a break, what failed? What caused that?
Elsie, first of all, this is a bit of a painful confession that we have to face, but it's also unfortunately true, and it is reality. What failed was not SME Bank, but the Bank of Namibia.
Okay.
Bank of Namibia is the central bank. They are the regulator. They are supposed to look after banks. Now, since SME Bank failed, now we have a deposit guarantee scheme, and we have all sorts of new laws and stuff to try and prevent this, but it should never have happened. If SME Bank was regulated as diligently as the Bank of Namibia would regulate any one of the four big banks, then it would never have happened. You see, so after SME Bank lost 100 million of their clients' funds, it's a bit useless now to come up with a deposit guarantee scheme. It's very necessary, but it's painful. That's a sad reality that it required such a huge failure of a public institution, hurting a lot of people, before we realize that there is no deposit guarantee scheme in Namibia. You know, there's nothing that protects the ordinary person. And that is what happened there. I mean, what happened at SME Bank was criminal from the bank side, from their side. And SME Bank is long not over. We are still going to see and hear lots of stuff, but you know what happens with these drawn out cases where there are criminal charges against prior officials, or where you can find them, or where it goes about recovering as much of the funds as you can. In the end, you could not get around the fact that most of the money was stolen. And we've got a good idea who stole it. But those people are outside our jurisdiction now. They're not in Namibia, you know. So the blame must be laid before the regulator. The regulator is Bank of Namibia. And you can say what you want. They can slaughter me for saying this, but they cannot get around the fact that according to the Bank of Namibia Act, it's not mandated, it's much stronger. They are compelled to make sure that financial institutions operate in the law and within the regulations as defined by Bank of Namibia. It's not external regulations. You know, so expect a lot of noise around SME Bank to continue for another 2, 3, 4 years, and expect some legal action. But the sad part is, after a while, after 3 or 4 years, people get fatigued. And then really, you know, if you've lost 50,000 in the account there, and they recovered some of it, and you get 10,000 back, then after 4 or 5 years, you say, I'm stuffed. I've had enough. I'm not going to worry about that 40,000 that I really lost. I write it off. I never ever want to hear about SME Bank again. And this is unfortunately a very typical reaction from people when they were at the receiving end of criminal activity in finances. But the point that is important for us in our discussion is that the regulator failed to regulate. Now can you see, here's a second instance of where compliance becomes the risk. The example that I use of NAMFISA is where compliance is a risk in a positive sense. It's very clear what you have to do or what you're not allowed to do. Now we're looking at another example where non-compliance or where a default by the regulator resulted in a huge loss, massive loss, and massive pain for thousands of people. So now it is compliance by default turned into a risk. And this is the type of thing that we need to address in our financial services. That if you and I open an account and we earn $1,500 or $2,000 a month, I mean, we really of the lowest income earners in the country, and we barely manage to save $50 or $100 in a month. After a couple of years, we've got $1,000 or $2,000 like a nest egg. To people who suffer, that is a lot of money. And you have to be able to give them 101% guarantee that money is safe. So SME Bank must never happen again.
Ever.
And for that, to prevent it, the regulator must do its job.
So just for clarity, Mr. Steinman, so the Bank of Namibia has still not rectified what caused the SME situation? Like, have they adopted to a new regulatory way?
Elspeth, that is not correct to say that.
Oh,
what caused the failure of the bank was criminal activity.
Yeah.
You cannot rectify that.
No, but I mean,
you will not. But you can have whatever law you want. You will not stop people
from
being crooks.
Okay.
And if it's somebody else's money, it's always nicer to steal somebody else's money than your own. So that part has been done. It's the internal processes, the oversight part from the central bank on the internal processes of SME Bank was lacking because they should have picked it up. Also, think for yourself. You don't move 100 million without anybody else noticing it. I mean, you don't move 1 million without anybody else noticing it. So if you start moving 100 million, your nose must tell you there's something fishy going on. And that was never picked up. So it was oversight or a lack of oversight that allowed SME Bank to operate sort of between the lines.
Okay. But that is some clarity that we did get on the SME situation, but also in terms of, the regulation and compliance and how that basically was part of reason. And I think on my part, I think it's the first time that I heard that someone said that there is someone that can take the responsibility for this.
You remember what I said before we started recording? All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. And you can have all the regulations you want, and you can have all the compliance that you want. If the oversight is not there, you will run into repeats of SME Bank every few years.
Okay, so let's end it on that note, Mr. Daniel Steinman. We will be back again next week. For those who want to listen to previous conversations, talks, you can, of course, go to the website economist.com.na to get our conversations. Very interesting, so don't miss out on that one. Again, we will talk next week. From me, Elsa Binyani, and from Mr. Daniel Steinman, we say goodbye to you.